Caroline's hands were blistered. Thick calluses formed ridges across her palms like scars on a battlefield. The rough edges of cement bags and coarse bricks had claimed their share of her skin, yet she lifted another load without hesitation. The sun blazed overhead in Lagos like an unforgiving overseer. Its rays reflected off the half-constructed buildings and corrugated metal sheets that lined the dusty road, making the air shimmer. Workers milled about, men mostly, but amid them was Caroline, the only woman on site, moving with silent determination. Her hijab was a faded maroon scarf tied tightly over her head, dust caking its once vibrant fabric. Her shirt was men's clothing, oversized and gray with patches of dried mud. Her trousers had been mended 3 times already. But she carried herself with a kind of dignity that didn't come from clothes or comfort. It came from the fire in her chest. At just 23, she had already experienced more struggle than many face in a lifetime. Her father had died of malaria when she was 15. Her mother, once a vibrant teacher, had fallen ill with a disease that doctors never named but that slowly sapped her strength. Caroline had become the sole provider, not just for her mother but for her little sister, Zina, who still dreamt of becoming a nurse. Most mornings began before dawn. She would quietly boil cassava in a rusted pot, serve her mother water to take her herbs, braid her sister's hair, and then slip on her boots and hard hat before catching a packed lorry to the construction site. She didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Caroline, barked a foreman, his tone sharp but familiar. She straightened, the cement block still balanced on her shoulder. Break time's over. More bags need moving. Trucks on the way. Caroline nodded and walked across the scaffolding like a ghost of strength. Her back ached, but pain had become an old companion, uninvited but familiar. The other workers watched her with mixed emotions. Some admired her grit, others pitied her, and a few resented being outperformed by a woman. But none could match her consistency. Every day, she showed up. Every day, she endured. One of the younger boys, Daipo, ran to help her when he saw her struggling to lift a second bag. "I got it," she said kindly, but firmly. "You'll hurt yourself." Daipo shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. "You work too hard, Auntie Caroline." She laughed softly, the sound rare and fleeting. "Work is all I have." Daipo didn't understand what that meant. Not fully. But Caroline did. When the shift ended that day, she didn't go home straight away. Instead, she passed by the supermarket, one of the fancier ones where rich people shopped. She didn't go inside, she couldn't afford anything there. But she liked watching the families come out with their carts full of groceries. She liked imagining what it would be like to buy whatever she wanted, without counting every naira. As she sat on the curb, resting her legs and watching shoppers, a black Range Rover rolled into the lot. It stood out even among the other sleek cars, polished, tinted, humming with quiet authority. The man who stepped out was tall, with a sharp jawline, short-cropped hair, and effortless grace in the way he moved. He wore a simple polo and jeans, but even from a distance, she could tell, he was different. He didn't notice her. Why would he? He walked into the store, and for a moment, Caroline felt like she was watching a movie, some distant world she could never touch. She sighed and stood up to leave. But fate wasn't done with her that day. At home, her mother was lying on a mat near the window. A pot of soup bubbled faintly in the corner. "You look tired," her mother whispered. "I'm always tired," Caroline replied with a smile, sitting beside her and fanning her gently. Zina burst into the room a moment later, her eyes gleaming. "Guess what? I came first in class again." Caroline's eyes lit up with pride. "That's my girl." She handed Zina a small loaf of bread and a sachet of milk she had managed to buy with her lunch savings. It wasn't much, but Zina treated it like a feast. Later that night, Caroline sat by the window, watching stars flicker in the sky beyond the laundry line. She thought about the man in the Range Rover. His clean shoes. His calm eyes. She didn't envy him, not exactly. But she wondered what it would be like to live a day without carrying the weight of the world. The next morning, she was walking past the same supermarket, heading to the construction site when something caught her eye, just beside the driver's side of a black SUV parked haphazardly near the edge of the lot. It was a wallet. Not just any wallet. It looked new, leather, expensive. Heavy. She looked around. Nobody was near it. She picked it up cautiously, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. She opened it and froze. Bundles of crisp notes. Cards. Gold, platinum. IDs. Business cards. The name read, Vincent Adewale. Her heart thundered. She recognized the name. He wasn't just rich, he was one of the richest men in the city. CEO of multiple tech companies. A man who dined with ministers. Caroline stood there for a long minute, clutching the wallet, torn between instinct and conscience. She looked back at her calloused hands. A single card in this wallet could pay her mother's medical bills. Could send Zena to a real school. Could buy her freedom. But she closed the wallet slowly. And walked toward the supermarket counter. Caroline stood frozen at the supermarket counter, clutching the black leather wallet like it was something sacred, like it had the power to change her life. And it did. The cashier, a young woman barely older than Zena, eyed her curiously. "Can I help you?" Caroline hesitated, her eyes drifting back to the entrance of the store. The man, Vincent Adewale, was nowhere in sight. Maybe he had already left. Maybe he hadn't even noticed the wallet was gone yet. But Caroline's conscience whispered louder than temptation. "Yes," she finally said, her voice low but clear. "Someone dropped this outside. He might still be here." The cashier took the wallet and opened it. Her eyebrows shot up. "Oh wow, this belongs to Vincent Adewale. You know him?" "Who doesn't?" she chuckled. "He owns the real estate behind this plaza. He's been in the news, donated to a hospital last week." Caroline just nodded, trying not to betray her nervousness. She felt out of place in this store with its bright lights and clean floors. Her boots had tracked in mud. Her clothes smelled of cement and heat. "Wait here," the cashier said. She disappeared into the back office, leaving Caroline standing by the register while people passed her by, glancing but not seeing her. One couple looked at her like she might be begging. A boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and asked, "Why is that lady so dirty?" She stepped back, embarrassed, and considered leaving. But then, the glass doors opened, and in walked the man himself. Vincent Adewale. He looked concerned, speaking quickly to the manager beside him. Caroline recognized his voice from television interviews, calm, confident, measured. The cashier pointed toward her. Vincent turned. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the whole supermarket seemed to fall silent. Caroline felt the weight of his gaze. It wasn't judgmental. Just curious. She stepped forward and extended the wallet with both hands. "You dropped this," she said quietly. He looked at her, then at the wallet, then back again. There was a pause, brief, but heavy. "You found this?" he asked. She nodded. He took it slowly, flipping it open to confirm the contents. "Everything's still here." "I didn't touch anything," she said quickly, almost defensively. He looked genuinely surprised. "You could have kept it. Or walked away." She shrugged. "Wasn't mine." Vincent tilted his head, observing her. "What's your name?" "Caroline." "What do you do, Caroline?" She hesitated. "Construction. Laborer." He raised an eyebrow. "And you brought this back, knowing who I am? I didn't return it because of who you are, she said, her tone suddenly bolder. I returned it because it's the right thing to do. That stunned him into silence. And then, to Caroline's shock, he smiled. A real, warm smile. Most people wouldn't, he said. Especially not when they need it. Caroline didn't answer. She didn't want to talk about what she needed. Vincent looked down at the wallet, then back at her. I owe you my thanks. You don't owe me anything, she said, already turning to leave. Wait, he called after her. At least let me offer you something. She stopped, but didn't turn around. I can help, he said. Job, education, whatever you need. Caroline turned her head slightly. You think because I gave back your wallet, I'm expecting a reward? No, Vincent said. I think because you gave it back, you deserve one. For a moment, the two stood there, in a silent standoff of principles. Then Caroline shook her head gently. Goodbye, sir. And she walked away. The next morning, Vincent sat in his car outside the same construction site. He had made some calls, found out her full name, where she worked. He wasn't sure why he had come. Was it guilt? Curiosity? Or something else? He watched as Caroline moved between scaffolding poles, carrying tools and bricks with practiced efficiency. The sun beat down on her, but she didn't flinch. Her strength was quiet, almost noble. She didn't take a single note, he whispered to himself. Vincent had built empires. He had negotiated million-dollar deals, dismantled companies, and spoken in halls filled with billionaires. But none of those people would have returned that wallet. And yet this young woman, covered in dust, had done so without blinking. Later that day, as Caroline walked out of the site, exhausted and aching, a car pulled up beside her. The same black Range Rover. She stiffened, unsure if she should run or wait. Vincent stepped out. I'm not here to bother you, he said. Just talk. She sighed. I told you. I know. But hear me out. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. This is my assistant's number. If you ever change your mind, about school, work, anything, I want to help. She looked at the card, but didn't take it. Why? She asked. He paused. Because people like you are rare. And I don't want to forget that. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. Then, slowly, she took the card. I'm not promising anything, she said. That's okay, he replied with a gentle smile. Neither am I. And with that, he left. But something had shifted. In both of them. Days passed, but Caroline couldn't shake the encounter from her mind. It wasn't just that she had met Vincent Adewale, the billionaire whose name was etched on skyscrapers and hospitals. It was the way he had spoken to her. Not with pity. Not with superiority. But like she mattered. She had folded his assistant's card and tucked it inside her boot. She told herself it was just paper. Just in case. Nothing more. But every night, when she returned to the one-room shack she and her daughter called home, Caroline found herself staring at it longer than she wanted to admit. One evening, after Zena had gone to sleep, her little arms curled around an empty juice bottle she used as a toy, Caroline stepped outside under the blinking light of a borrowed bulb. She stared up at the sky, wondering what kind of world Vincent Adewale lived in. Probably marble floors. Heated pools. Rooms bigger than the entire building they lived in. And still, he'd come to see her. She pulled out the card again, ran her thumb over the name printed in clean, elegant font. Ruth Iamide, Executive Assistant to Mr. Vincent Adewale, Direct Line, plus 234 XXXXXXXX. She didn't know what compelled her, but she went inside, picked up the tiny second-hand Nokia phone she used for emergencies, and dialed. It rang once. Twice. Then. Ruth speaking. How may I help you? Caroline swallowed. This is Caroline. Mr. Adewale gave me your card. A pause. Then, a friendly tone, yes. Miss Caroline. We've been waiting to hear from you. Waiting? That word sent a chill down her spine. I'm not asking for charity, she added quickly. Of course not, Ruth replied gently. But Mr. Adewale would like to invite you to lunch. Just lunch. Caroline hesitated. I don't have clothes for something like that. We can send something to you. I didn't say yes. I understand. But the invitation remains open. No pressure. Caroline sighed. Let me think. We understand. Thank you for calling. 2 days later, Caroline showed up outside the restaurant Ruth had texted her, an elegant rooftop garden in the heart of Victoria Island. She wore a simple navy dress that the assistant had sent over discreetly through a courier. It fit surprisingly well. She felt exposed, like every eye on the street could see she didn't belong. Inside, soft music played over the gentle sound of trickling fountains. Uniformed servers moved with precision. Caroline walked past tables where women in pearls and men in cufflinks laughed over wine she couldn't pronounce. And there he was. Vincent stood to greet her. He wore a light gray linen suit with no tie, looking effortlessly powerful. But his eyes held no arrogance, only warmth. You came, he said, smiling. I still don't know why, she admitted. He gestured to the chair. That makes 2 of us. They sat. The server brought water. Caroline fidgeted with the cloth napkin. I wanted to thank you properly, Vincent said, in a setting where we can talk, without scaffolding in the background. Caroline let out a reluctant laugh. You really tracked down my site? Of course, he grinned. Wouldn't you want to know who found something valuable if you lost it? She studied him. It wasn't the money you were worried about, was it? No, he said after a pause. It was what the act revealed. Integrity in a stranger. That's rare. Their eyes locked. It was quiet for a moment, the way conversations fall silent not out of awkwardness, but depth. I wasn't raised to keep what isn't mine, Caroline said softly. Even if I need it. And do you? She didn't answer. But her silence told the truth. Vincent's expression softened. I grew up poor too. Not like now. My mother sold akra by the roadside. I used to run barefoot in the streets of Abeokuta. Caroline blinked. You? He nodded. Every billionaire has a story. Most just don't like telling it. That broke the ice. They talked. About her work on building sites, about Zena, about dreams she'd buried under bags of cement and unpaid bills. She found herself laughing. She watched him loosen his collar, laugh too. Not like the man on TV. But a real person. When lunch ended, Vincent walked her to the elevator. You have strength, he said, pressing the button. Caroline raised an eyebrow. You don't even know me. I know enough to want to, he replied. She stared at him for a beat longer. This doesn't mean anything. I know. But they both knew it did. That night, back in her shack, Zena climbed into her lap, whispering sleepily, Mama, you look like a queen today. Caroline held her close. For the first time in years, she believed maybe, just maybe, that something good could come from simply being herself. The rains came hard that week. Not the polite, steady kind. These were Lagos rains, wild and loud, hammering the tin roofs of shanties like war drums. Streets turned into rivers. Traffic collapsed. Generators drowned. And the weak parts of the city began to fall apart. In her neighborhood, Caroline had to wrap Zina in 3 layers of cloth to keep her warm and dry. Their leaking roof coughed water at random intervals. She used buckets, pans, even a plastic bowl to catch the leaks. One particularly bad night, lightning cracked the sky, and the power went out completely. Caroline sat by candlelight, holding her daughter close, humming an old lullaby her own mother had sung. In that dim flicker of flame, her mind drifted, not to fantasy, but to memory. Vincent's voice. The way he had listened to her without pretending. That one lunch had changed something deep inside her. She hadn't seen him again since. She didn't expect to. But still, some part of her wanted to. The next morning, as the rain subsided to a drizzle, her phone vibrated. From Ruth Iamide. "Are you okay, Miss Caroline? Mr. Adewale asked us to check. Flooding in your area looks bad. We can send assistance if needed." Caroline read it 3 times. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. Finally, she typed. "We're fine. Just water. Thank you." But as soon as she sent it, the bucket collecting the roof leak tipped over with a loud crash, spilling everything onto the floor. Zina screamed. Caroline closed her eyes. She had always managed. Always. But this time, something broke. She grabbed the phone and sent another message. "Actually, if it's not too much trouble." That afternoon, a dark, sleek SUV pulled up at the mouth of the slum. It gleamed like it had no business being there. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains and torn tarpaulins. Children gawked. Caroline stepped out of her shack holding Zina's hand, wrapped in a nylon raincoat. The window rolled down. Vincent was in the back seat. "I didn't expect you to come yourself," Caroline said, her voice barely above the rain. "I needed to see it for myself," he replied, his eyes sweeping over the flooded lanes, the soaked laundry lines, the crooked doors. "You grew up like this?" she asked. He nodded. "Worse." There was no mockery in his gaze. Just quiet understanding. "Let me help," he said. She shook her head. "I don't want to be a charity case." "This isn't charity," he replied. "It's shelter. That's all." And somehow, in the way he said it, she believed him. Caroline found herself inside one of his goose houses by nightfall. Not a mansion, just a quiet, clean, 2-bedroom home on the mainland. Dry clothes. A stocked fridge. Even a small pink bicycle for Zina, delivered before they arrived. "How did you know her size?" she asked. Vincent smiled. "Magic." Zina was already writing it in circles, laughing. Caroline watched her daughter and felt something strange, safety. Not fear. Not suspicion. Safety. "Just a few days," Vincent said. "Until the rains stop." "I can't stay here," she protested. "People will talk." "Let them," he shrugged. "You helped me in silence. Allow me to do the same." That night, Caroline sat on the guesthouse bed in borrowed pajamas, scrolling through her thoughts like pages in a storm-soaked book. She wasn't naive. She knew how these stories usually went. Rich men didn't help women like her unless they wanted something. But so far, Vincent hadn't asked for anything. Not even gratitude. Just time. She couldn't figure him out. That scared her more than anything. The next day, he came again. In jeans this time, no driver. Just him and a bag of suya in one hand. "I thought we could talk," he said, holding it up. They sat on the front steps, sharing food wrapped in greasy newspaper. Zina fell asleep inside, curled under a fluffy blanket. "I'm not used to this," Caroline confessed. "This?" Vincent asked. Being treated like a person, she said quietly. He looked at her with something close to pain. Then the world has been blind. The rain eased into silence. Why are you really here, Vincent? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, because sometimes life gives you a moment to change course. And I think you're that moment. Her breath caught. You don't even know me. But I want to, he whispered. She stood quickly. You should go. He nodded, stood, and walked away without argument. But before leaving, he turned at the door and said, I'll come tomorrow. Not because I expect anything. Just because I hope. That night, Caroline cried for the first time in years. Not from fear. Not from pain. But because, deep down, she realized. She wanted him to come back. The rain finally stopped. But inside Caroline's heart, a different storm had started, one she didn't know how to quiet. Every evening, Vincent came. He never stayed long. Sometimes he brought suya, other times a new book for Zina, or flowers plucked from some random garden. Once, he even came with a bag of cement and fixed a leaking patch of the guesthouse roof himself. She watched him from the kitchen window that day, shirt rolled to his elbows, sweat mingling with dust on his rich skin, and a crooked smile when he turned to catch her looking. I used to work construction in Canada, he told her. To pay for night school. I wasn't always this guy. And she believed him. Because the truth was, every piece of Vincent Adewale that he revealed felt genuine. Not billionaire genuine. But human. Caroline didn't say much, but her eyes did. And he was learning how to listen to them. One evening, as the sunset burned golden over Lagos, Vincent brought a large brown envelope. What's this? She asked. Papers, he said. A sponsorship. There's a night college nearby. You said you once wanted to be an architect. Her heart stopped. How do you even know? I asked Zina, he smiled. She said you draw buildings when you're sad. Caroline opened the envelope with trembling fingers. It had everything, tuition, books, even a small stipend. It felt unreal. Like something from a movie. A lie wrapped in gold. I can't take this, she said, voice cracking. You can. And you will. Not because of me. But because you were always meant to be more than your struggles. But why? She asked, her eyes searching his. Why me? He didn't hesitate. Because when the world looked at you and saw dirt, I saw fire. Because when I was drowning, you didn't ask who I was. You just helped. And because I care. She held the envelope to her chest. I don't need saving, she whispered. I know, he replied. But maybe, just maybe, you deserve to fly. The days turned soft and golden. Caroline began attending night classes. Zina, now healthy and full of light, started school in the mornings. They stayed at the guest house for weeks, but it never felt like a cage. It felt like pause. A breath between battles. And Vincent remained a quiet presence. Sometimes he brought dinner. Sometimes just stories. They never talked about the future. Never talked about love. But everything in the silence between them screamed it. One night, during a blackout, they sat on the balcony under stars. Vincent said, my father was like your neighborhood, tough on the outside, broken inside. I hated him, but I became him in some ways. All walls. All noise. And now? Caroline asked. Now, he exhaled, I want something quieter. Something real. She looked at him. Then you should leave. Before this becomes more real than you want. I tried, he said softly. But my heart doesn't obey contracts. She looked away. I'm not the kind of woman you marry, Vincent. I know, he replied. Her lips parted. He continued, because you're not a kind of woman. You're the woman. The one I've been looking for in all the wrong places. Her throat tightened. But I'm scared, she confessed. So am I, he said. But being scared together sounds better than being alone. The next morning, he didn't come. Nor the day after that. Nor the day after that. Caroline waited by the window every evening, pretending she didn't care. But her hands trembled while pouring tea. Her thoughts spiraled. Had he changed his mind? Had she scared him off? Then came a knock. It wasn't Vincent. It was Ruth Iamide, the woman from the office, holding a folder. He asked me to give this to you, she said gently. Inside the folder was a letter. Caroline. If you're reading this, I've gone away, not because I'm running, but because I need to become worthy of you. I'm fixing things. Making space. I want to come back the right way, not as a man lost in shadows, but as someone you can be proud of. Wait for me. Or don't. But know this, my heart stayed behind, with you. Vincent. Caroline folded the letter slowly, pressing it to her chest. He hadn't run. He had just paused. Like her life had paused. To breathe. To rebuild. And now, maybe, to begin. Weeks turned into months. Caroline threw herself into her studies, losing herself in architecture, sketches, structural math, and late-night design reviews. But every night, as she laid her head down, a hollow space in her heart echoed with the silence of Vincent's absence. Zena often asked, "Is Uncle V coming back?" And Caroline would force a smile. Someday, maybe. But in her chest, she feared that someday might never come. Then came the collapse. One Friday morning, news broke that shook Lagos to its core. Adewale Holdings was under investigation. Fraud. Embezzlement. Insider trading. Massive financial missteps. Investors had pulled out. Share prices had plunged. And Vincent Adewale was nowhere to be found. The media went wild. Headlines screamed betrayal. Former partners cursed his name. Employees were left stranded. Caroline stood frozen, eyes wide at the radio in the student lounge. Students whispered and stared at her, some with pity, others with judgment. The whispers stung. Was she his mistress? Did she know all along? Her throat burned. When she reached home, her landlord was waiting outside. "I need the room back." "Next month," he said coldly. "But I paid." "With what? Dirty money? We don't want trouble here." He slammed the door before she could answer. Over the next few days, Caroline endured the slow unraveling of her hard-earned peace. Calls from school officials came in. Even the night college hesitated to let her continue until they could confirm that the source of her sponsorship wasn't connected to criminal activity. No one cared that she had worked hard, earned her place, or that she hadn't heard from Vincent in months. In their eyes, she was guilty by association. At night, she held Zena close. "We've been through worse," she whispered. But her own voice cracked with uncertainty. One morning, as she was packing her belongings, a loud knock shook the door. She opened it cautiously. 2 men in suits stood there. Stern, grim-faced. "Miss Caroline Okafor?" "Yes?" "You'll need to come with us. You've been named in an ongoing investigation involving Mr. Vincent Adewale." Her heart sank. "But I haven't done anything." One man softened his tone. "We believe you. But you may be the only one who can help us find him." At the investigation bureau, they showed her photos. Surveillance footage. Emails. Transaction records. But what hit her the hardest was the footage of Vincent boarding a private plane in Cape Verde, alone, head bowed, weeks ago. He hadn't disappeared into wealth. He looked broken. "We think he's trying to protect someone," the agent said. "Maybe you." "Me?" Caroline asked, stunned. "He transferred several assets to your name, quietly. You're now listed as the majority shareholder in a shell company tied to some of his clean investments. He left a letter with our office in case you were contacted." She opened the envelope with shaking fingers. "Caroline. If they come for you, tell them everything. You have nothing to hide. I gave you those assets because they are the only clean things left of what I built. If I don't return, let them go. Burn it all if you must. But know this fall was always coming. I just didn't want you caught in it. If I survive this, I'll find you. Not to ask for forgiveness, but to prove I was never a lie." Caroline wept as she read it. Not because of the money, but because of what he'd tried to shield her from, even in ruin. She stood up and looked the investigators in the eye. "I'll tell you everything," she said. "And then I'll find him." With their help and legal clarity, Caroline was cleared of all wrongdoing. The assets Vincent left her were returned to the state, but she asked for one thing to remain untouched: the scholarship trust fund in Zena's name. She got it. She packed up and left Lagos with her daughter. Not in shame, but in determination. To rebuild. To rise. 6 months later, in the quiet hills of Ogun State, Caroline finished her diploma and began apprenticing with a small but respected architect. Her designs were bold, grounded in the city's energy, and shaped by everything she had lived through. And though Vincent never wrote again, she kept building. Because that's what people like her did. They turned ashes into foundations. Then, on a Sunday morning, as she was sketching under a mango tree, Zena came running. "Mama! There's someone here." Caroline stood, wiping her hands on her skirt. She walked to the gate. There, standing in the sun, scarred, bearded, thin, but unmistakably him, was Vincent. His eyes met hers. And everything paused again. Not out of fear, but out of love returned. He stepped forward and whispered, "I'm sorry it took me so long." She didn't speak. She just stepped into his arms. For a moment, everything stilled, like the earth itself held its breath. Caroline couldn't move. Vincent stood right there, not as the billionaire she once helped, not as the man whose empire had crumbled, but as someone raw, humbled, and deeply changed. His once perfectly tailored clothes were replaced by a simple linen shirt and old slacks. His hair was longer, beard darker, and eyes deeper, clouded by pain but lit with hope. Zena stood nearby, hiding shyly behind the doorpost. She hadn't seen him in nearly a year. The last time she did, she had drawn him a picture of a tall man with a cape, like a superhero. Today, he looked like one who had been to war and survived. "Uncle V," she said, stepping forward. Vincent dropped to one knee, eyes glistening. "Zena, you've grown so much." She ran into his arms. Caroline watched them, arms crossed, heart clenched. It wasn't anger she felt, but something more difficult to name. Relief. Joy. And fear. He finally stood up and met her eyes. "I didn't know if I'd ever see you again," he said. "I didn't either. I thought of you every day." "I thought of what you left me in," she replied, not coldly, but with all the weight of what she had endured. He nodded, accepting the pain. "I deserved that." They stood in silence, the breeze rustling the trees around them. "I want to talk," she finally said. "Not just about us. About everything." They sat under the same mango tree where she had been sketching just moments before. Vincent told her everything. How after the crisis hit, he refused to flee, until he realized some of his partners were planning to frame him completely. He left Lagos only after transferring all clean assets into Caroline's name, knowing she could survive without being tainted by the corruption. He had lived in hiding across West Africa, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Benin, changing names, working small jobs, collecting evidence to expose the rot from within his own board. And finally, he had returned. Cleared by international watchdogs and ready to rebuild. Not as a billionaire, but as a man who had lost everything, except his soul. Caroline listened. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, he looked at her and said, "I know I don't deserve to ask this, but I came back for you. Not the money. Not the name. You." She placed a hand on the table between them. It didn't reach for his. But it didn't pull away either. "I believe you," she said softly. The following weeks were filled with quiet healing. They didn't rush anything. Vincent rented a small place nearby and began volunteering at a youth center in town, helping teach young boys skills in finance and business. He never introduced himself as Mr. Adewale. Just V. Caroline watched him from a distance, slowly letting go of her bitterness. And one evening, as they walked through a field bathed in orange sunlight, she looked at him and said, "You know, I never told you what I really wanted." He turned. "What's that?" "A partner. Not a prince." He smiled. "Then let me earn it." Months passed. Zena grew closer to Vincent again, often sitting beside him during his outdoor classes. She called him Papa V now. Caroline started her own small architectural studio from home. Her first clients were farmers wanting irrigation upgrades. Her second, Vincent himself. He commissioned her to redesign an old abandoned community center in the city, a place that could become a learning hub for poor students and workers alike. "I want to name it after your mother," he said. Tears welled in her eyes. She would have loved that. Then, on a rainy afternoon, something unexpected happened. Vincent knelt in the same dirt yard where she had once chased off a thief with a spade. He held out a modest ring, not flashy, not gold-studded, but handcrafted from recycled metal. "I lost my kingdom," he said. "But I found something richer. Will you marry me, not as a reward, but as a promise that this time I'll build something that can't collapse?" She looked down at him, stunned. Zena giggled in the background. Caroline laughed too, through her tears. Then nodded. Yes. The wedding wasn't extravagant. It was held in the community center, still under renovation, with paper lanterns and flowers from the local schoolyard. Her white dress was sewn by a tailor from town. He wore the same shirt he had worn the day he returned. But it was the most beautiful wedding Lagos never saw. Guests danced barefoot. Zena carried the rings. The people who had once called her poor came to celebrate the wealth of her character. And Vincent, once a man defined by his bank account, was now defined by his presence, his humility, and his love. They exchanged vows that day, not promising riches or fame, but honesty, growth, and partnership. As the sun set, Caroline leaned into him and whispered, "You didn't fall in love with a damsel in distress." He smiled. "No," he said, kissing her forehead. "I fell in love with a warrior who saved me." Months after the simple wedding that brought together two souls from different worlds, something began to blossom, not just between Vincent and Caroline, but in the very heart of the community they served. Caroline had always dreamed of building structures that lasted, not glass towers for billionaires, but buildings with roots. Foundations made of sweat, hope, and shared purpose. And now, with Vincent beside her, not above her, they set out to build something that would matter long after both of them were gone. The Adebayo Community Resource Center, named in honor of Caroline's late mother, opened its doors with a celebration like no other. No red carpets. No corporate sponsors. Just people. Hundreds of them. Farmers, bricklayers, teachers, single mothers, jobless youth, even former beggars, everyone who had been overlooked by the flashy city life. They walked through doors made not of polished glass, but sturdy reclaimed wood, into rooms filled with books, tools, whiteboards, and open space. Each hall named after an act of kindness: the Honesty Room, the Resilience Lab, Zena's Corner. Vincent managed the logistics, quietly. He refused to sit on a board or take a title. He was just Uncle V, helping to set up the sound system, teaching budgeting workshops, serving food during events. Caroline, however, had grown into a leader the people needed. Not one for speeches, but when she did speak, it was like lightning in slow motion. Every word struck hearts. You don't have to be rich to build. You don't need a title to be respected. What you need is courage. And that, we all have. Her voice had weight now. And when she stood with chalk in hand teaching construction blueprints to teen girls in hijabs and coveralls, she looked every bit the icon of change she had never known she could become. Zena, meanwhile, flourished. Now enrolled in a small private school on a scholarship set up by Vincent, she took piano lessons, read books on astrophysics, and volunteered as a reading mentor at the center on weekends. Everyone in the community referred to her as the Little Light. Once, during a stormy evening when a power outage darkened the center, Zena lit a candle, stood on a table, and declared, "We don't need electricity to keep helping people. We just need each other." Everyone applauded. But legacy isn't built without struggle. There were times when the plumbing broke, when funding dipped, when rumors spread that Vincent was secretly trying to buy influence again. Caroline confronted him one night in their small kitchen. "You know they still whisper about you." He didn't flinch. "Let them. But does it bother you?" He turned slowly. "Not anymore. You see, before. I thought legacy meant statues. Headlines. Towers with your name. Now I know it's what happens after the doors close. After the lights go off. It's who shows up when no one's watching." She smiled. That was the man she loved. Their relationship, too, had matured. They still had arguments, about Zena's bedtime, about architectural decisions, about him being too generous with their limited budget. But each disagreement ended in shared meals, laughter, and long walks under the stars. One night, as they sat outside, barefoot, watching Zena chase fireflies, Vincent held her hand and said, "Do you ever miss it? The old life?" Caroline looked out at the half-built library, the kids playing soccer in the dirt yard, the women practicing speeches for a local business pitch. "No," she said. This is richer than any diamond." Years passed. The center grew. More centers were built, modeled after the first. Not franchised, not copied. Inspired. One in Kano. One in Kumasi. One in Kigali. All based on the same principles: honesty, humility, human power. Caroline became a name whispered in other cities. Not a celebrity. A symbol. People said, if she could rise from a dirt construction yard and rebuild a broken billionaire into a servant leader, then maybe, we can rebuild our own lives too. In the end, that's what their legacy became. Not a fairy tale. Not a rags to riches story. But something harder, and more beautiful. A story of pain endured. Dignity preserved. Love earned. And a legacy that lived not in marble statues, but in open doors, strong hands, and full hearts. For years, Caroline and Vincent lived in a quiet corner of purpose. The Adebayo Center stood as a testament to what people could build when they chose love over status, service over greed. But greatness, even quiet greatness, doesn't go unnoticed forever. One day, a man in a tailored gray suit arrived at the center, stepping out of a sleek, foreign electric car that gleamed like a mirror. He waited patiently as children ran past him barefoot, chasing a football. He didn't look irritated. Just observant. Caroline found him standing beside the vegetable garden that Zena and her classmates had planted last summer. "You're not lost," she said flatly, wiping her hands on her jeans. The man smiled. "No, ma'am. I'm exactly where I need to be." He handed her a business card, simple, but the weight of the name made her blink. International Humanitarian Impact Awards, Selection Committee. They had been nominated. Not by a friend, not by a media campaign, but by an anonymous visitor who'd stayed 3 nights in the area, disguised as a volunteer. Apparently, the ripple effect of their work had reached the ears of philanthropists, educators, and even global health networks. The award came with a massive grant, and a televised event in New York City. Caroline froze. Vincent read the letter again and again, then handed it back, saying softly, "It's your name on it. Not mine." She frowned. "But we did this together." He smiled. "Maybe. But it started with you. And if you don't accept it, someone else might rewrite your story." What followed was a whirlwind. They flew to New York on an invitation-only chartered flight. For someone who had never been on a plane, Caroline handled the journey with quiet grace, though Zena squealed with joy every time the clouds danced below them. The award ceremony was surreal. Red carpets. Spotlights. Interviews. Billionaires clapping politely. Celebrities asking for photos. Designers offering dresses. Her name, Caroline Adeyemi, on the screen in bold golden letters. When she stepped on stage to accept the award, the room hushed. She took a deep breath. "I'm not here because I'm special. I'm here because someone returned what he had lost, not his wallet, not his pride, but his purpose. And we just decided not to waste it again." Her voice cracked, but not with nerves. With truth. The standing ovation lasted longer than she expected. Back home, nothing changed, and yet, everything did. The media began to visit. Documentaries were filmed. Partnerships were offered. And then came something neither of them saw coming. A political party reached out. They wanted Caroline to run for office. Local governor. They called her the Builder of Hope. Vincent remained silent for a long time when she brought it up. "I don't want to lose what we've built," she whispered one night. He responded, "Then take what we've built, and protect it." She ran. And she won. But not through money or favors, through heart. Her campaign slogan was simple: "Dignity is a birthright." At her swearing-in, she didn't wear a suit. She wore her old construction vest over a clean white blouse. And Zena, now tall and graceful at her side, held the ceremonial Bible with pride. Years later, Caroline stood on the foundation of a new hospital, breaking ground in a forgotten rural village. Vincent stood nearby, arms crossed, a soft smile on his face. A reporter approached and asked, "Do you ever feel overshadowed by your wife's legacy?" Vincent chuckled. "Overshadowed? No. I helped build the lamp. She just chose to hold it high." That night, as they sat by the fire pit outside their modest home, Caroline turned to him. "Do you ever wish we stayed quiet? Just ran the center, lived in peace?" Vincent looked at her, his eyes filled with the same awe he'd felt when she handed him back that leather pouch years ago. "I don't wish for less peace. I wish the whole world had the kind of peace we found in each other." As Zena headed off to university, on full scholarship, her heart set on urban planning, Caroline and Vincent stood outside the center, hand in hand, watching kids paint a new mural. It read, "Build love. Lay every brick with it." They didn't need to say a word. They were home. Years passed like whispered prayers. The center grew, the country shifted, and Caroline's name became not only a local legend but a global symbol of hope. Yet for all the triumphs, for all the speeches and cemented legacies, something remained untouched between Caroline and Vincent, a quiet storm that had long been building. It started with a letter. An old rival company, the one that had once tried to take over Vincent's former business before his downfall, was now looking for a neutral voice to mediate their corporate dispute with a community their mining was displacing. The twist? They wanted Vincent. Not as a businessman, but as a moral voice. They offered full transparency, fair wages, a seat on the ethics board. They even named the package, the Vincent Accord. Vincent looked at the file quietly for a long time, then turned to Caroline. If I say yes, it means being away. A lot. It means press. It means exposure. And, he paused, eyes searching hers. It means doing something for the world, not just for us. Caroline didn't answer at first. Instead, she stepped outside. It was raining lightly. The scent of wet earth reminded her of the day she first met him, staring up from that mud-soaked construction site, not knowing she was handing back more than a wallet. She returned a few minutes later, eyes steady. If this is where your peace leads you, then go. Vincent left within a week. For the first time in a decade, their lives were separate. He traveled to Kenya, India, Argentina, offering wisdom not as a tycoon, but as a man who had once lost everything and been rescued by a woman who could have asked for the world and chose kindness instead. Their calls were short. Sometimes daily. Sometimes only a smile sent over a video message at midnight. But over time, silence crept in. Not bitterness. Just distance. A year later, when he returned, older, leaner, with gray in his beard, he found the center still standing, still vibrant. And Caroline? Still fire in her eyes. But tired. They sat together that night under the same flame-lit sky that had once held their dreams. Caroline finally said, "When you were gone, I learned I could survive without you." Vincent flinched, but didn't interrupt. She continued, "But I didn't like it." He exhaled slowly. "I thought I was helping, but I was just running from something I hadn't faced." She turned to him sharply. "What?" "My guilt." He finally confessed what he'd hidden all along. Not about his past, but how he had never truly forgiven himself, for falling from grace, for dragging her into a life she didn't deserve, and even worse, for loving her so much he feared his presence might one day dim her light. Caroline closed her eyes. Then said something he would never forget. "Vincent, I didn't fall in love with a billionaire. I fell in love with a man who let go of being one, to become mine." They didn't need a ceremony to renew their vows. But one afternoon, with children running in the background, Caroline took a copper ring, one she had shaped herself in a local workshop, and slipped it onto Vincent's finger. "No diamonds," she said, smiling. He laughed. No price tag could match this anyway. Their final project was the most ambitious of all, a free trade school for young girls in construction, engineering, and community leadership. They called it the Groundbreakers. Zena returned from university to help run it. A full circle. When Vincent finally passed in his sleep at the age of 76, there was no grand media circus. Just a handwritten letter he left for Caroline. It read, "You gave me back my life, and then let me build one with you. I never stopped choosing you. Not even for a second. Forever laying bricks. Vincent." Caroline lived on. She never remarried. She didn't need to. Every day, she walked the corridors of the school, taught young women how to measure steel, calculate load, and lift not just beams, but each other. And every night, she would pause under the old mango tree outside the center, where the city lights barely touched the ground, and whisper. "I'm still laying bricks, Vincent."